Hello again, everyone. This is the Vintage Sewing Machine Garage YouTube channel. And I'm making a video today because it occurred to me as I was recently talking about these two machines. And the video I was focusing on sewing machine bed dimensions. But today I wanted to talk to you about, why would you pick one machine over another? And let's say that you are not familiar with vintage machines, or maybe you are, and maybe it's still useful to you. You're thinking about getting a vintage sewing machine, and you start looking, and there's tons of them out there. Oh my God, millions of machines were produced over many decades, and they were always coming out with new models. And companies like Singer kept the old models and the new models in production. Very smart of them to do. And you had choices. You had the big brands like Singer and the white brand, and then you had the European brands, and then you had a lot of the machines made in Japan after the Second World War, particularly in the 50s and 60s, for example. And those machines, often you might see the name Janome or Brother or Juki, but most of the time you didn't see a Japanese name. You saw the name of a department store. Or a sewing machine distributor like the Morse Company. The point being, you had a lot of brands and a lot of competition. So let's say, it's okay, you are in the present time right now, and maybe you have no machine, maybe you have a new machine, and either you like your new machine or you want to throw your new machine over a cliff. I don't know. But whatever it is, you are interested in a vintage sewing machine. And you say, well, gosh, they don't all look alike, but how would you make a decision? So let's say that you no longer are satisfied with what you've got and you want to get a vintage sewing machine. Some people, when they look at vintage sewing machines, they're looking at, a classic single straight stitch machine, such as a Singer a Singer 201 or any of the Singers that are basically dedicated straight stitch sewing machines. And they're great. They're wonderful. I restore lots of them. You see many of them here on the channel. But some people say, I want, the power and the metal construction of a vintage machine. However, I would really like to be able to do zigzag. Or maybe I would even like to do something else, some sort of decorative stitch. A blind stitch, or in machines that were made after these two, you would like a machine that can even do stretch stitches, but those come a little later with the popularity of knit fabrics and the need for stretch stitches to really make knits more practical to sew. All right, so you're out there, you're looking, let's say you go on to Craigslist or Facebook or eBay or wherever you're going. I strongly suggest not getting one that is going to have to be shipped to you. You have a very significant chance of having that machine arrive to you in pieces because it will be destroyed. So you're looking locally and you go on to Marketplace or Kijiji here in Canada or Craigslist or wherever. You're on you're searching for some kind of online classified, or maybe it's an auction for that matter. And you look at machines, you're like, okay, well I see these two machines, and by the time we get to the 50s, you're seeing some black machines being made, but more of the lighter colors like this. And you see Singer, and you think, oh, well, many people recognize the name Singer because it was the largest brand on the planet once upon a time. And then you see other brands. You're like, well, are these any good? Sometimes the Singer will be less, but very often you'll see a higher price on the Singer. And then you'll see something like this, which is not even a main brand, right? It wasn't even the Sears brand. It was the brand of a department store. In North America, for those of you who don't live in North America, for my viewers in Europe and Asia and other places, the retail business, even when we have chains, right, these large retailers, typically, for most of that time, we did not have national retailers. There were a few, but most of the retail department stores where people would buy sewing machines, it was the only other place you bought a sewing machine other than a sewing machine dealer, right? An independent dealer. You went into a department store and they were regional. So, if you were going to buy a sewing machine under the name Dayton, you might have gotten it in Michigan because there was a chain up there. If it was Wanamaker's, it was in Philadelphia. Macy's, which was not always a national chain, I believe it is now, but it was not always in the eastern side of the United States. So Simpson's was a Canadian retailer, and you may see this machine, and it may have lower demand, and it may actually be priced lower, and you might think, oh, is it lower in quality? Not necessarily. There are differences, but then you look at these two machines, and they kind of look the same. They both have two-tone neutral, sort of a taupe beige cream colors. Okay. Both of these machines are capable of doing zigzag. Yes, that's another check if you're searching for that. They both can do multi-stitch. They have multi-stitch. When I say multi, I'm talking about decorative stitches, right? You have utility stitches like blind stitch, but then you also have decorative stitches and all kinds of, they used to call them embroidery stitches, not actually embroidery, but never mind. So both machines have adjustable needle position. This one does, and even the Singer does. Left, right, center. And so you have, of course, obviously you have reverse for both machines or back tacking, and you have the ability to either to lower the feed dogs. In the case of the Singer, you actually raise the needle plate, but the effect is kind of the same. So you can do free motion work if you want. You have, of course, stitch length control. You have tension assembly dials on the front. Both of them have lights, and so both of them, in this case, both are double needle capable. You can sew 2 stitches at once. So then, how do you decide? Well, think about it this way. You have to decide, do you want a machine that has a class 15 bobbin or a class 66 bobbin? The 66 bobbin is for top-loading sewing machines, and it holds a little bit less thread than does the 15 class. The 15 is a wider bobbin and it holds more thread. You may find that very useful. But then counterpoint would say, yes, but with the class 15, you have to remove the bobbin case to get your bobbin. Once you've wound a new bobbin, put thread on it, you have to take the case out, take the bobbin out, wind the bobbin, put the bobbin in, put the case in. So there's that extra step. With the top-loading bobbin, you don't get as much thread on that bobbin, but you don't have to take the bobbin case out. You just take the bobbin out and put it back in and thread it. So, yes, there are certain other differences. The Singer is a slant shank machine. This Simpson's is like most of these Japanese machines. It is a low shank machine, and it uses class 15 bobbins. But both of these are fairly common, and they have their fans on each side. So what do you think is the difference? You may decide that you want the Singer because you think it's cool looking, or you might say, this machine's pretty cool looking too, and it has a built-in buttonholer. The Singer, you had to add the attachment, right? But there's about 8 years time difference between these machines. Singer would eventually put built-in buttonholers in its machines. I personally am not a fan of built-in buttonholers, and I've talked about that in the past, but that's just me. Maybe you think they're just awesome. So really, it really comes down to aesthetics. Well, there is one other thing I should mention. The Singer has all steel mechanicals, as does this Japanese-made Simpson's model, but the Singer has an aluminum chassis and body, which makes it much lighter, but if you're going to have it in a table, does it matter? So if I sound like I'm going back and forth, I am intentionally, because that's what people often do when they're trying to make up their minds. So what I would say to you is, if you want something for aesthetic reasons, and aesthetics are important, they matter to a lot of people, a lot of sewers, you may decide you like one or the other. Just pick one. They're both the same, essentially the same color scheme. Do you want something that is lighter? You don't have to lift it. If you pull it out of a table, you're going to have to lift it out, and maybe one is lighter in weight, and that matters to you. Most vintage sewing machines have motors. This one has a motor in the back. It has a cover on it, and it uses a belt. Most of them do. This particular Singer has a beltless motor. It's a direct gear drive. Both of them are high quality. They both last a long time. So if I have not given you an absolute perfect reason why you should buy one or the other, that's intentional. That's by design. Because how can I tell you? I don't know what your needs are. When someone comes to me and says, I see you restore vintage sewing machines and you talk about them, which one would you recommend? My first question is, what kind of sewing do you do? Do you sew wedding gowns? I just had a machine, someone picked up a machine today who sews wedding gowns, couture gowns. That's a very different thing. And maybe a rotary hook, right? 360-degree rotary hook on something like the Singer, maybe that makes more sense. But that again gets into the weeds of which stitch looks more, or what is a more perfect stitch. You're getting really into the weeds there. There's nothing wrong with the stitch this machine makes. This has a vertical needle, that has a slant needle. Are you going to sew webbing and lots of heavy, thick fabrics? You can do it. Both machines are powerful enough to do it, but you are less likely to break a needle if you use this machine because it has a vertical needle setup. This one has a needle that is off by 10 degrees off the vertical. So again, which is which? Which one do you prefer? I can make a case for both of them. You will probably, on average, pay less for the Simpsons, but don't look down at the Simpsons as being inferior. It's really, it's marketing. Simpsons was a great retailer once upon a time, but their name in sewing was not like what Singer's was. And so in the end, think about the kind of sewing work that you do, and then also think, oh, okay, I kind of know the projects I'm going to work on, and maybe one machine will work better for you than the other. And if that's not the case, then maybe it really is about, aesthetics. What does the machine look like? Which do you prefer better? Sometimes, beauty is only skin deep. Maybe that's the case here. But anyway, I just wanted to share this with you all. I was thinking about that. Oh, by the way, not only are these machines similar, but both of them have sort of an off-white cream color. I call it like a nougat color, and then a beige. Singer called theirs light beige, I believe, and I don't know if Simpsons had a name for theirs. There's slight differences, but they're very close, right? Very close in color scheme. Whether that's intentional, I don't know. But anyway, this is just sort of me imagining you buying your first vintage machine. You're thinking, well, I don't know, which one should I go for? Maybe just see which one is in better shape. And has anyone given any maintenance to it? Because that's going to make a big difference in whether you are happy or less than happy when you get your first vintage sewing machine. Thank you all for watching, and if you would, please consider supporting my channel. You can click on any of my Buy Me a Coffee links. They're all over the place on this channel, and you can go right to my own Buy Me a Coffee site, and you can donate at whatever level you think appropriate, which will help me continue to buy more machines, whether they're in tables or not, and get them rescued, keep them out of the landfill, and get them into the hands of people who will take care of them, use them, sew with them, and very likely pass them on to the next generation or two. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.